We meet the shadow all day long in all kinds of small ways, but we're not taught how to identify it. And so it recedes back behind the curtain again and hides naturally from us because our first inclination when we meet the shadow is to deny it. I didn't really say that. I didn't mean it. I'm not that critical, or I'm not a liar, right? Or I'm not mean. I didn't really mean that mean joke. Sorry, but that's not me. So our first impulse is to deny it, and then it hides again. And we lose all the juicy information that's encoded in these messages when the shadow erupts. And it starts out in our childhoods protecting something. If it's protecting us from getting angry to avoid punishment, that's a good thing. But if we go through the lifespan unable to feel anger, even when authentic anger is called for, say we're being abused, then we lose the connection to that energy and to that emotional range, right? And so it erupts. People become rageaholics. They scream at their spouses or their kids because they don't know how to manage their anger because they've never had to. So that's the shadow erupting. And that's kind of an obvious example, but it can erupt in so many different ways. When I was in clinical practice, a lot of people talked about how they would criticize their partner and they didn't know why. And this critic would come up, and as we explored it, we found that the person who was expressing the critic was making distance with the other partner, but doing it unconsciously. Oh, what a relief, she pulled away. I can go do my own thing. But the conscious process of saying, I need space or I need some time alone wasn't known. And so it wasn't articulated. And so they did it by criticism. So the shadow can erupt in these indirect ways, and then it harms our intimacy and safety in the relationship. Or it can show up as procrastination in a creative project. So it starts as a protector and it ends up as a saboteur. And it can sabotage our conscious intentions about anything at all. Creative projects or communication or intimacy, friendship, at the workplace, all the ways people sabotage themselves. So we're meeting the shadow all the time, but we don't have the tools to romance it. We don't have the tools to make a conscious relationship with it.
I want to understand more what you mean by romancing it. And I think part of the question that I'm working with is in your model, is the goal to become aware of shadow contents? And that's good. Check, I'm aware of it. Or is there something else once I'm aware that this lives in me and was repressed and I can see it kind of peeking out and okay, I'm aware it's there. Is that good enough or is there some other set of steps that are needed?
Yeah. So romancing the shadow is the name we gave to the method. And so there are some other steps. And I think most people, for example, addiction, most people have awareness of their addiction and still can't do anything about it. So awareness is a step, but it's not sufficient. So let me just articulate my method as kind of quickly as
Please.
I can. Yeah. So let's use addiction. Let's use food addiction. And for our listeners, you can relate this to sex addiction, drugs, alcohol, love, any kind of compulsive behavior that you feel like you can't control. So this client came to me and she said, my boyfriend is unavailable. And every night I'm waiting by the phone and I'm eating ice cream. And I've gained 10 pounds and I don't know what to do. I can't stop eating ice cream late at night. So we began to explore, kind of slow down the process to bring awareness to it, as you said. What is going on in this process? So I said to her, there are 3 cues I want you to look for. What are you saying to yourself? What are you feeling? And what are you sensing in your body just before you go for the ice cream? So this takes some time. It takes some self-reflection. You have to kind of slow down opening that fridge. And then she said, I'm saying to myself, if only I eat, I can wait for him to call. And she was feeling sad and empty. And her body was getting tight around her shoulders and her neck, and her belly felt empty. So now she had 3 cues that this particular shadow character, I call it a shadow character. We can't work with the entire personal shadow at once, right? It's pretty unbounded. It's kind of limitless. So what we do is we begin to pick a particular behavior or feeling, and we personify it. So when you have the thoughts, feelings, and sensations of that shadow, you personify it by giving it a name. She called it the foodie, giving it an image. And her image was a big open mouth. And then recognizing that this is not who you are. Because part of what happens with the shadow character is it grips you and you get lost in it and overpowered by it. And you think, oh my God, I'm this angry monster or this foodie or this crybaby or whatever it is. And so you practice beginning to observe it. Now, most people can do this with a centering practice. If you have a meditation or vipassana practice, a mindfulness or a belly breathing practice, you learn how to watch your thoughts as they move through. And of course, listeners to Sounds True will be familiar with this. So she began to watch the foodie, and she traced it back in her history. That's the next step. And she realized that her mother used to overeat at night. When my client was growing up, she'd watch her mother overeat because she was waiting for her husband, who was unfaithful at the time. And she couldn't speak up and say to her husband, what's going on? Why are you coming home so late? So she ate. So the behavior had been modeled. And maybe it was modeled for another generation too. We don't know, because these shadows are really intergenerational transmissions. So I said, well, what are the consequences if you just continue this behavior? Well, I'm going to get more depressed and more overweight and unhealthy, and it's just going to go nowhere. So it was a couple of months, and I said, do you think you're ready to call him? So she called him up, and he said, no, I don't want the relationship, but I didn't know how to tell you. So she spent a few days really devastated and upset, disappointed. And then she called me and she said, you know, this is such a relief because I know the truth and I don't have to allow the foodie to take over anymore. I can move on now. So each of these shadow characters has the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same physical sensations, and that's how you can identify them. You give it a name, you give it an image, and then you romance it, meaning you make a conscious relationship to it when it emerges from the unconscious. Some people paint it and draw it. Some people write letters to it or from it. You dialogue with it. And it's so interesting because it expands your self-knowledge. You can uncover these secret hidden parts of yourself, and each one of them has valid hidden needs. And if you can discover, let's say, the valid need of the foodie, what was that? It was for her to be able to speak her truth. She wasn't able to risk rejection as her mother wasn't by asking the question directly. And so she was indirectly stuffing her feelings with the ice cream. But that's a valid need that's hidden in that addictive behavior. And every single shadow character has that. So if you can begin as an adult to meet the valid needs of these younger parts, these shadow parts, they start to change. They start to lose their grasp and lose their control over you. And that's kind of the bigger picture of what I mean by romancing the shadow.